Okay, this morning we have some good news about TIF transparency, and that the tax bills will be in the mail soon, but for the first time, taxpayers will be able to see exactly how much of their money is going into the TIF fund. This is very important because this means about 12% of the taxpayers in Cook County, or about 220,000, properties, will now be able to see specifically the shift, if they're in a TIF area, from perhaps it's going into other funds. It might be the local city fund, it might be the park district fund, it might be the school fund, but they're able to see now how much goes in the TIF fund, how much goes into the other areas. This is a very difficult thing to do. We've been working on this for years. Many of you might remember that Mike Quigley used to be a commissioner on the county board. Now he's a congressman. He was certainly calling for TIF information on the tax bill a long time ago. But it's a very difficult process because Cook County's property tax system is anything but not complicated, extraordinarily difficult to do. So I want to do a shout out here, one to our Director of Tax Services, Bill Vasilopoulos, who'll be up here in a moment, okay, and his department, along with the Bureau of Technology under Tony Preckwinkle. They've done a marvelous job, very complicated over the years, to be able to achieve this day. We're going to go to Bill, and he's going to talk about the tax rates, but I want you to know that we'll be back in just a few weeks with our annual TIF announcement. And the TIF announcement will be how much money is being generated among TIFs, and we'll have several comments to make about how we think the process is working. So I'm bringing you the good news, and now Bill is going to try and deal with the complexities of the tax rates. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Today, we're announcing the 2013 tax rates for all the taxing districts in Cook County. To achieve those rates, what we do is we divide the final levies as we've determined them from each of the taxing districts by the taxable value that exists for each of the parcels in those districts to come up with the final rates. And the documents that we've handed out to you today reflect those rates. In order for us to determine what the final levy that we're going to be spreading over all the taxpayers within Cook County is, there are two levels of reduction that the taxing districts must face. First is a rate ceiling reduction by fund, that the district cannot exceed the rate ceiling times the taxable value within that district for specific funds. And the second reduction is the tax cap law, officially referred to as the property tax extension limitation law. The primary limitation there is based on CPI, and the CPI this year is 1.7%. That is down from last year of 3.0%, and next year, for your reference, it's going to be 1.5%. So it's come down from last year, and it appears not only this year, but next year it's going to be staying at a relatively low amount. Traditionally, over the last 20 years that we have been processing the tax cap law and imposing it on the taxing districts, the average CPI has been 2.5%. What are some of the issues and facts and things to note this year? One is the equalizer. The equalizer, which is issued by the Illinois Department of Revenue, went down 5% this year. This year's figure is 2.6621. That is down from last year's figure of 2.8056. That has caused the EAVs throughout Cook County to go down by 7.5%. In the city, the values dropped about 4.4%. In the southern suburbs, they dropped a little over 6%. And the primary reasons for those decreases is the 5% reduction in the multiplier. Up in the northern suburbs, that area was reassessed this year by the assessor, and the drop there was 12.8% on average, and it varies tremendously township to township depending on what the assessor, what they reassessed and to what levels they reduced the assessment. The 12.8% is attributed in part to the lower multiplier, 5%, and that reduction that the assessor has determined in each of the northern triennial areas. But regardless of what happens with the EAV, the rate adjusts accordingly because we still have to collect roughly the same amount of money that we collected last year in totality for all the taxing districts. Last year, the entire levy was $11.9 billion. This year, it's $12.1 billion, about a 1% increase. So even though districts under the CPI could go up to about 1.7 increase, some of them accessed it, others did not, for a variety of reasons. And the overall increase this year in totality is about 1% over last year. But dividing that $12.1 billion by the EAVs that have gone down means the rates that will go up. And that's what's before you today. You see a comparison between this year and last year's rates for each of the taxing districts in the county. And you will see increases in those rates commensurate with the decreases of the EAVs. That doesn't mean taxpayers are going to be paying more money because the rates go up. Simply because their taxable value in most cases has dropped. And the lower taxable value times a higher rate will mean roughly the same from last year. There will be increases, but relatively small, because again the CPI was 1.7%. So in the city of Chicago, you may see an increase anywhere between 0.5% and 1.5% on an average tax bill. In the suburbs, it may be a little bit more, up to maybe 2%. But in many cases in the suburbs, it will probably be less than 2% too. The suburban areas are much more difficult to pin down and give you specific numbers because there's a wide variety of taxing districts in the suburbs, and each district has their own increase or decrease in a couple of cases, but not very often. A couple of other numbers to understand. The districts this year, there are 1,500 taxing districts, and that has held relatively constant. Of those 1,500, about 463 are eligible to be capped. The vast majority that are not part of the cap, but in the count of 1,500 are SSAs, TIFs, SSAs are special service areas, TIFs, and home rule districts. So of the 463 that were eligible to be capped, about 353 were actually capped, removing about $427 million from each of their levies collectively. I want to go over the report real briefly, and then I'll open it up for questions. The report we've issued highlights, after the first 3 pages of text, highlights the quick facts. A lot of the facts that I just mentioned to you are outlined there on that sheet of paper. The large document on the right-hand side of your folder, which is entitled the 2013 Tax Rate Report, lists the tax rates of each of the taxing districts. The first few pages are the city taxing districts. One thing to note, on Roman numeral page 5 of the report, you have the pie chart, which shows the distribution of money throughout the city, where your taxes are going on average. What's not listed here are TIF districts, which, as we mentioned earlier, that TIF districts will divert the money more towards TIF, and the percentages will be adjusted differently. But TIFs only represent approximately 12% of the tax bills. This is for the remainder of those bills, okay, and where the money is going within the city. Other points if you want to look at the assessment and how the equalized assessed valuation is spread throughout the county, on Roman numeral page 7, we have a breakdown. The top line is overall, Cook County overall value decrease from last year to this year, and then broken down north suburban areas, southern township areas, and the city of Chicago. The rest of the report focuses on the suburban districts. It's listed in township order. We first list each of the taxing districts within the township, and then at the end of the township, before we start the next township, are what we call sample composite rates. We itemize each of the municipalities in that township and tell you what the total tax rate is of all the taxing districts that will be taxing those parcels in those villages. This is not every single variation of tax code, of composite tax rates, which are represented by a 5-digit tax code number, but it is the largest sample within each of those municipalities. There are over 2,500 variations. All you'll see here is a couple hundred. That concludes my remarks, and are there any questions?